It's me, Big Ugly Jim. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the Queen. The Queen is dead. We now have King Charles III, Chucky III. All of this is stuff that I consider to be genuinely uninteresting. Genuinely uninteresting. The concept of a monarchy feels a little like, I don't know, colonial, well, I don't know, 1700s y. And it just doesn't, it's so anachronistic. Like, as a Canadian, I have no idea why we bother with the system anymore. It does not make sense to me. My experience has never been that it matters. And like nothing sort of sums up the figurehead nature of the current monarchy better than Brexit, where the Queen of England, watching people do this very radical thing to potentially deeply affect the country that she queens is over, said nothing. She wasn't a big fan of Brexit, from what I understand, and had the power to prevent it, but didn't. Right? In Canada, we have, at the federal level, we have the Governor General, who is the Queen's representative. I don't even know who our current Governor General is. I'm a bad Canadian. Because it's mostly a figurehead sort of appointment. The role of the Governor General, theoretically, is to enact the will of the Queen. And the Queen has no will when it comes to Canada. On a provincial level, which, if you're from America, would be like those states things that you have, we have lieutenant governors, similarly, speaking on behalf of the Queen. Because the Queen, once upon a time, was an important figurehead in Canadian politics. But that just scaled back and back and back and back, and to the point where now, and I think this is true in England even, like the job of the Queen is mostly to have children and open malls. So like now we have a new person to open malls, and they have children already, and their children are going to have children. And Prince Charles, a lot of people talk really nice things about Prince Charles and how he's a strong proponent for like healthcare and stuff. Maybe, but he's just a rich dude. He's a big believer in alternative medicine shit, which I think is very dumb. That's my own take. If you don't agree with me, sorry. We don't have to agree on everything for you to love me. I believe he does homeopathy things and stuff. Like, cool, buddy, cool. The monarchy really is a representative of the colonial nature of how Canada came to be in its current state, and that's not something that I put a whole lot of thought into growing up, because why would you? You go to school, they tell you that the jolly good white folk came and they found the indigenous people, and everyone got along really super well. And the indigenous people were like, hey, why don't you just take our land? That'd be cool. And you're like, right on. What a sweet thing to do. And that kind of gets ingrained into your brain, and you just assume that this is how shit was. Then you get a little bit older, you do a little bit of research, you find out a few things, and you realize that it turns out colonialism wasn't that hot, wasn't that awesome from a global perspective. The sun never sets on the British Empire really meant the sun never sets on Britain's exploiting people. Way to go. You win capitalism. And you can argue that the Queen wasn't like that. The Queen, she was only the Queen from like the 1950s on. She's this figurehead character that didn't do a colonialism. She's just born into that role. Ain't that a pip? And that's true. But I think that it's fair to say that, number one, the Queen was a very wealthy woman. The British royal family, turns out, have done fairly well for themselves. They got a few condos. They have a couple cars. They go on vacations. They're doing all right. And that money did not come from their regular day job, where obviously, the Queen gets paid to do queenly things. No. That money mostly came from stealing resources in the past. Now, one could argue the Queen isn't really stealing resources in the present, but she's living off the avails. Or was. She's not living anymore. She was living off the avails of the people who were her subjects. In the vernacular of our treaties, she referred to or this was Queen Victoria, but referred to the indigenous peoples of Canada as her Indians. Little possessive there. That's a little creepy, but that's how the world viewed people at the time. You belonged to a monarch, and the fact that Britain was the most effective at colonizing Canada, and Confederacy was tied directly to Britain as opposed to any of the other countries that sent colonists, meant that she gets dibsies on all of the people who were not British subjects who lived here. Like, you can do that. You could, at the time, you could just be like, you could dibs people. That's not spooky at all. That's not creepy. And you could do things like, take all of their stuff. This is the thing. This is, it's all about the capitalism. The exploitation of people and resources for the betterment of the few over the masses. And literally, you can look at all of Canadian history and you can go, wow, yeah, we did a bunch of that, and we still do. Now, a lot of people will bring up residential schools, which, for the record, the Queen could have done a lot about, but did not. Could have even apologized for. Took a long time for that to come, didn't it? Did the Queen ever apologize? I don't recall. It was well within the Queen's power to effect change, but the Queen did not, because it was not important. It did not matter. And that's gross. That's gross and yucky and ugly. When we got rid of the residential school program, thus ending genocide, what we did was we had this new program we called the 60s Scoop or Sweep. I don't remember which. But that was, let's just take all the indigenous kids that we had been shipping into residential schools and throw them in the foster care system so they can be raised by good white families. And that worked real well. They basically kidnapped a bunch of people for all intents and purposes and put them in the child welfare system. For the good of the indigenous people, obviously. When the 60s Scoop ended, we created birth alerts. Birth alerts, in some places, I think, are still a thing. But again, the principle was, in theory, a very good thing. In theory, a birth alert was so that social workers or nurses or whomever, when they were present at the birth of a child, they could basically go, oh shit, this child is being born into a family that is not going to be able to take care of it. We need to act. We need to remove this child from the home. Sounds good on paper. But somehow, the birth alert system managed to focus almost exclusively on indigenous people. Ain't that a pip? Ain't that weird? And again, we continued our process of taking indigenous people out of their homes, out of their cultures, and raising them with the good white folks. Foster families get more money for fostering indigenous children than they do for fostering white kids. Anytime people tell you that, oh, it's okay, we don't have to have abortion, we just adopt kids out. No, you're not adopting kids out, you're putting them in social services. And that social services system, which also conservatives are opposed to, does not look after them, does not give them, generally speaking, good lives or loving environments. It makes them dollar figures for families that becomes their source of income, or a source of income, which is kind of gross. Kind of a bunch of gross. So all of these things, all of these programs have continued what is an indigenous genocide in Canada since Confederacy, when we became a country, and before that, when we became invaders in the country. All of this is colonialism. All of this is the stuff that we should not have done but did. And now we should be making good on and fixing as best as we can, not fixing the past, but helping to, you know, alleviate the problems that we caused. And the Queen could have done a bunch of stuff there. But the Queen couldn't be arsed. First off, I want to say thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed, please like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Thank you to my patrons that support me on Patreon. I am a little streamer, and these people are all really awesome for supporting me. I try to put up stuff at least once a week, and I live stream every Saturday at noon Mountain Time on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, like an old man. Again, thanks for watching, and have a kick-ass day.